Hey, folks, it's great seeing you. My name is Jerry Herships. I am the pastor at Applewood Valley United Methodist Church in Golden, Colorado. Golden's about 20 minutes outside of Denver, as the crow flies, as they say. We are having a cold snap right now. It is dropping down to 30s, 40s. I think right now it's exactly 50 degrees, but supposed to be cooling down a little bit later. Finally starting to edge into winter a little bit here. I don't know what it's like where you are, but I hope you're staying warm. Let's have some God talk. So the passage today is coming to us from Galatians, one of the communities that Paul wrote to. This is the 6th chapter. It's only 2 verses, verses 4 and 5. Here's what it says. Each one should test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves alone, without comparing themselves to someone else, for each one should carry their own load. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Now, all of us know this Thursday is Thanksgiving, which means today must be the Be Thankful sermon. It's always a challenge to find sort of a new angle from which to preach gratitude, because after all, technically, we should be grateful every day. And I think it's important to be thankful for all that we have and all the prayers God has answered for us. I'm not debating that. But I think we have to also sometimes thank God for the things that didn't go the way we wanted them to, and realize that that can be good too. So more than 30 years ago, country music star Garth Brooks' album, No Fences, was on the Billboard Hot Country chart at number 1 for 30 weeks. One of the songs on that album was called Unanswered Prayers. The single reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot Country song chart in January 1991, and that song stayed at number 1 for 2 weeks. Taylor Swift was 2. That makes me feel old. Many people believe that part of the reason that the album's success was so huge was that single, Unanswered Prayers, because of how much it resonated with people. We often pray for things that, in hindsight, we're glad we never got. So, example, in 1985, my brother was the entertainment editor for the ABC affiliate in Detroit. I was in college, was still trying to decide if I wanted to go into broadcasting or focus on entertainment. Back then, there was a difference, actually. And my brother offered me an internship the summer of 1985, unpaid, but still, I remember thinking how cool it would be to actually be working in television. I mean, with the hopes that, of course, it could someday lead to something steady after I got out of college. I really wanted to take this gig and was ready to say yes. Turns out, when I crunched the numbers, came back to earth, I had the realization that I just couldn't work for free. I couldn't do it. I had to bring in some money, and I was pretty bummed. But instead, I auditioned for and got a job as a one-man show at Cedar Point Amusement Park in a 1,000-seat auditorium, and I did 42 shows a week. It started me on the road to show business. The die had been cast in my mind. I would be in show business for the rest of my life. Thank God for unanswered prayers. Now, on top of that, 2 summers later in 1987, I worked again at Cedar Point, and I met a cute little redhead singer-dancer who was working at Lusty Lil's Palace Theater. And she still puts up with me 38 years later. The truth is, we rarely know what we want, and even less what we need. The Stones were right. You can't always get what you want, but if you try, sometimes you get what you need. Now, at the core of a lot of our desire is misinformation. We think getting this thing will fix everything. That job, that relationship, that promotion, that title. What's worse is we see others who have gotten it, and honestly, we can get a little jealous. This passage in Galatians is for any of us that has ever wondered, am I doing enough? Everyone else seems farther along. Why am I not where they are? Why am I not where I want to be? Paul is telling us to just show up for our work. Then do the next faithful thing, whatever that is. And then the next, and the next, and the next. Carry what God gave you to carry, because that will be enough. The truth is, when we look at others, we don't know anything about the rest of their lives. As author Anne Lamott said, never compare your insides to everyone else's outsides. I know somebody who is a billionaire, has homes all over the world, a wonderful wife and kids, well liked, respected by everybody that he works with. By all measures, he made it. He also was in so much physical pain that he once said, I started to think I may have to do something drastic about this. I was at the point where I thought, I can't exist like this. I can't actually live. He started to think about how he would do it. Now, although he planned it, he said he never thought he would get there, implying that he didn't expect to follow through. But he was shocked at his own thoughts and feelings. He admitted he was using painkillers and alcohol just to numb the pain. That person was actor George Clooney. He was hurt really bad while filming Syriana back in 2005. And he injured his spine, and his brain created headaches so excruciating that they made him consider the worst. Now, George Clooney, billionaire movie star, People magazine's sexiest man alive, twice, thinking, I can't exist like this. I can't actually live. We only see the outside. His insides were a different story. And they don't have to be celebrities. I was talking to a friend this week that I hadn't seen in years. His work had taken off. Again, great family, great friends. Everything looked fantastic. And then he told me that last year he almost died of sepsis. Or the author who has best-selling books, been interviewed by Terry Gross on Fresh Air, had profiles done on them in the New York Times, and revealed this summer that she got, in her words, a shitty medical diagnosis. There is so much to be thankful for, especially if we stay in our lane and stop looking around at others' lives. It's been said many times by many people, including myself, but often attributed to Teddy Roosevelt, comparison is the thief of joy. And our good book isn't silent about it either. Proverbs tells us, do not let your heart envy sinners. And elsewhere in that same book, a tranquil heart gives life to the flesh, but envy makes the bones rot. Kind of gross, but you get the point. All of which gets us to today's passage. Let's break down today's verse and drill down a bit. As a change of pace, I thought I would offer up a letter of Paul's that scholars seem to agree that he actually wrote himself. He wrote it around 49 or 50 AD. So let's look at the passage again. Here's what it says, Galatians 6, verses 4 and 5. Each one should test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves alone without comparing themselves to someone else, for each one should carry their own load. So let's unpack this. So what does Paul mean when he says each one should test their own actions? First, let's look at the word test. The word test in Greek was dokimazo, and it means to examine, to discern, to evaluate for genuineness. What Paul's saying here is don't evaluate your life and your blessings based on other people. Look honestly at your own work, your own motivations, your own faithfulness. We turn and look inside. We do a self-examination, not a comparison game. And then he goes on to say, then they can take pride in themselves alone. Now, this isn't ego pride or being arrogant. The word here again in Greek is kalhum, and it means healthy, grounded satisfaction. Like somebody would say, you know what? I showed up, or I was faithful, or I lived true to what God gave me. It's actually the direct opposite of shame and insecurity or propping up your worth by outperforming other people. It's a kind of quiet confidence in walking your own path. You aren't in competition. You're proud of your journey, thankful to a God that has walked alongside with you and never left your side, a God that made you who you are. You are grateful for what God has given you. And you don't waste any time looking into other people's yards to see what they got that you didn't. Your worth isn't determined by what you didn't get. You're too busy being thankful for what God has given you. Now, Paul reinforces this with the rest of the sentence. It says, without comparing themselves to someone else. Now, this is at the center of the passage. See, it's not Paul's first rodeo. He knows how people are. He knows that comparison kills joy, breeds envy, distorts our calling in the world. And this is important, this type of thinking drives people back to legalistic thinking regarding God. It leads us to ask questions like, how am I doing compared to those people? It's like there's a scoreboard. There's my score, there's your score. See how my score is a little bit lower than your score? It's that stuff. In other words, Paul is saying your worth isn't measured by somebody else's highlight reel, Instagram posts, or humble brags on Facebook. It's not based on their calling, their gifts, or their pace. You're doing your thing, and you're thankful for your path. This is the definition of spiritual maturity. You're free from the need to compete with others, either publicly or even in your own head. I read this week a sentence that said, nobody watches you harder than the people that are jealous of you. Don't be that guy or gal. Now, I got to be honest. I was that guy for a lot of years. Sometimes that guy still pops up. As that prophet, singer, songwriter Tom Waits once said, you got to keep the devil way down in the hole. As a side note, I love Tom Waits' writing and singing. Although his singing is somewhat of an acquired taste, one music critic wrote, his voice sounds like it was soaked in a vat of bourbon, left hanging in a smokehouse, and then taken outside and run over with a car. Like I said, acquired taste. Actually, it occurs to me that Tom Waits is a great example of somebody who never compared himself to others. In the book, Low Side of the Road, A Life of Tom Waits, Tom's quoted being interviewed in that book. And the quote he says is, you can't really be too concerned with what people really think of you. You know, you're on your own adventure of growth and discovery. So it's not always good to be where they think you are. If you subscribe to it as well, which is easily done, because then you don't have to figure out who you are. You just ask someone else. For the record, Tom was never People Magazine's sexiest man of the year, but I don't think he cared. But I do think the Apostle Paul would agree with Tom. E.E. Cummings wrote a similar sentiment to this passage that Paul writes. He puts it a little differently, more of a modern context, if you consider 1958 when he wrote it modern. In his work, A Poet's Advice to Students, he wrote, to be nobody but yourself in a world which is doing its best night and day to make you just like everybody else means to fight the greatest battle there is to fight and to never stop fighting. Because we should acknowledge it's not easy to just be yourself, to not compare, especially when we're younger. But it does get easier as we age. St. David Bowie said, aging is an extraordinary process whereby you become the person you always should have been. And in the process, gratitude. The one thing we should be more grateful for than anything else is that, to paraphrase the Psalms, we are uniquely and wonderfully made. Okay, we're down to the home stretch. Last half of the last sentence, Paul says this, for each one should carry their own load. Now, what does Paul mean by load here? What does that word mean? The original Greek word was fortion, and it meant sort of the normal personal responsibilities of trying to be a disciple of Christ, the things we do day in, day out. Now, this shouldn't be confused with what Paul says earlier in this chapter in verse 2, where he tells us to bear one another's burdens. There, the Greek word actually means heavy or overwhelming burdens that we then help each other carry. Paul's saying at the end here, take responsibility for your own life, your own spiritual growth. Help others when they're overwhelmed, but in regards to the day-to-day, Paul's telling us just to do the work. Now, if we were to put it all together and boil it down to one sentence, it would sound something like, live your own life before God faithfully, humbly, and honestly, without measuring your worth against anyone else. When we do this, we can't help but be thankful. And never forget that your messy, squishy insides, they're going to look way different than someone's shiny, polished outside. So stop comparing them. Few people walk around showing the inner messiness of their life. Besides, that'd be kind of gross. But know the life you have, messiness and all, is a gift from God. Tidy and perfect, it's boring anyway. This Thanksgiving, try to find the unique thing you have to be thankful for. Those things God gave to you and to you alone. And take a moment this Thanksgiving to give thanks for unanswered prayers. After all, if all my prayers had been answered, somebody else would be giving you this sermon. And I'd be given the weekend weather. Glad that's not so. Amen. So that's my take on gratitude, on being thankful. It's really easy to have that jealousy, that comparison, ugly thing raise its ugly head. But when you start thinking, it's like, you know what? Be thankful for some of the things at one time you thought you really wanted that really would have not worked out. We've got great lives. Now it's our job to share the love that we have, to go and put it in the world. You know the marching orders. Put more love in the world. I hope you have a great week. I hope you stay warm, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care, everybody.